US President Donald Trump has announced a new 35% tariff on Canadian imports, set to take effect from August 1st, marking a sharp escalation in his expanding trade war. In a letter to Prime Minister Mark Carney, Trump warned the rate could even go higher if Ottawa retaliates. Goods covered under the USMCA deal remain exempt, and energy and fertilizer tariffs will stay unchanged, at least for now. Trump accused Canada of undermining U.S. dairy farmers, enabling fentanyl flows across the border, and erecting unfair trade barriers, calling the trade deficit a threat to American security. Canadian officials say very little fentanyl originates from Canada and that they have beefed up border controls. If Canada works with me to stop the fentanyl, we may adjust this letter, Trump wrote. The move comes amid a wider trade crackdown, with Trump also imposing 50% duties on copper and planning 15 to 20% blanket tariffs on most other U.S. trading partners, including Japan and South Korea. In a new interview, Trump has said not every country would receive a formal warning, stating, "We're just setting our tariffs." Canada, America's second largest trading partner, sent $412 billion worth of goods to the U.S. last year and bought $349 billion in return. Trump's letter did not address ongoing trade negotiations, but said tariffs could be adjusted upwards or downward based on relations. Now we're joined by Dr. Jayjit Bhattacharya. He's a president at CDEPR, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you, Doctor, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, with Trump warning of even higher tariffs to former ally Canada, and if Canada retaliates, he's warning Canada about retaliation. What do you think are the likely scenarios for a tit-for-tat escalation here, and how could this impact global markets as well?
To begin with, when President Trump has put in the tariffs on Canada, the details of why he has put in the tariffs is sketchy, because he's basically saying that because of fentanyl coming in supposedly from Canada, that's the reason he has put in the tariffs. Now, clearly, it's not in Canada's interest to let such drugs pass through Canada, because it's going to impact the Canadians also. So if there is a proposal on the ground that the US authorities and the Canadian authorities need to work together to stop this joint menace, it's something that the Canadian will jump in either which ways. So linking it to tariffs is something which is difficult to understand and comprehend. And therefore, it's difficult to understand why the tariff has been put in the first place. And therefore, for Canadians to respond, they really don't have a basis to respond, because they don't know why the tariff has been put in the first place. And hence the tit-for-tat tariff escalation is a real possibility, because it just seems that the tariffs have been put arbitrarily from a Canadian perspective. And clearly, what President Trump has also mentioned for Canada is that if they respond, then the tariffs will go up. It reminds us of what happened between the US and China, where it shot up beyond 110, 120%, which really made trade meaningless. It was almost a ban on trade. That is going to significantly impact, in this particular case, both Canada and US, because Canada could respond in terms of the energy exports that they do. There's about $110 billion of energy imports that US does from Canada, and that's going to hurt also. So I think it'll be interesting to watch how things pan out.
And building on that, how is Prime Minister Mark Carney expected to respond, maybe diplomatically as well as economically?
His stance has always been, when he was up for the elections, has been that he will respond very aggressively to what he called as a coercion from the US side on trade issues. So based on his election promises, we expect that he will make some kind of a visible response in terms of trade, counter trade tariffs, especially in terms of the agricultural goods that are being imported from US. In fact, there are very deep connects in terms of agricultural sector between US and Canada. One is the fertilizer imports from Canada into US, which is critical for the US agriculture. Second is the imports of the finished products, which is agricultural products from US into Canada. So those are places where the Canadian Prime Minister could respond and put a choke on.
And what message does this send to other US allies like Japan and South Korea, especially as Trump prepares broader tariffs without formal warnings?
I think one of the first impact is they'll be questioning what is the definition of an ally, because the allies are being penalized, and are they really an ally, or do we change the definition of what an ally means? So maybe what an ally will mean from now on in geopolitics is somebody which is, or some country which is aligned militarily, but not necessarily from a trade perspective. So the definition of ally becomes much more limited as we move forward. Now, moving forward to the core question you asked, the response will be that they would like to diversify away from the U.S. in terms of both U.S. as a market as well as U.S. as a source of imports. And that really puts the US in the same bracket as China, where people are trying to diversify away from China because of what they did during COVID. And there was a supply chain restriction issue that happened. And the same seems to be evolving for the US. So it's going to lead to a lot of fracturing of the trade, of the global trade as we know as of now.
Thank you, Dr. Jaijit, for sharing that. You will stay with us as we stay on this topic. China's foreign minister says Beijing trusts Southeast Asian countries